A brutal signature, a treacherous voice. Both lead to the same sentence. The history of World War II was not only decided by guns and bullets on the battlefield, but also written in the dark by those who coldly sold their souls to the devil. Albert Forster, from a nobody, he climbed to the pinnacle of power and became a cruel tyrant, all thanks to his blind loyalty to the point of madness. And here is John Amory, a well-educated aristocrat, but chose to trample on the honor of his country to pursue crazy and sick political illusions. From the fiery cauldron of Danzig to the desolate streets of foggy London, two seemingly different fates emerge from the ashes of history. However, fate has bound them to the same inevitable tragic end, which is the hanging sentence for terrible crimes against humanity. Welcome to a story of the corruption of power and the humiliation of betrayal, where humanity collapses before temptation. Coming from a working-class family, Albert Forster's youth was spent in boredom doing menial jobs until he found what he considered light. He was trusted by Hitler not because of his outstanding talent, but this worshipful handshake proved his absolute and blind loyalty to the leader. At the age of 28, Forster walked arrogantly like an uncrowned king of Danzig, holding the power of life and death in his hands, and began to spread terror in this ancient city. Looking down from above, Forster turned the peaceful, free city into a blazing forward base, smiling with satisfaction as he successfully incited a wave of bloody ethnic hatred. At the moment the sound of artillery fire tore through the night, signaling war, Forster immediately announced the annexation of Danzig into Nazi Germany, opening the darkest days in history. Under his orders, brutal policies were implemented immediately. Tens of thousands of people were expelled in the rainy night or were brutally assimilated. Sign the German nationality register or die. That was the ultimatum he issued, forcing Poles to deny their origins in exchange for their fragile lives. Not stopping there, the campaign to purge intellectuals and clergy took place extremely fiercely, aiming to suppress all voices of resistance and eliminate the culture of this nation. While the people were suffering, Forster happily lived a life of debauchery, indulging in lavish parties at the villas he had taken over. Not far away, thousands of people quietly disappeared or died of hunger and cold behind the cold barbed wire fences of the concentration camps surrounding Danzig. He rules with absolute fear, venting his rage on his subordinates and disregarding human life like trash when things don't go his way. But power built on crime is not sustainable. In 1945, the blaze from the east signaled the arrival of the Soviet Red Army, bringing a death sentence to his regime. The tyrant who had sworn to defend himself now revealed himself as a coward, abandoning everything to flee, abandoning the city and the soldiers he had sworn allegiance to. His escape was short-lived, as he was recaptured by the Allies in Germany. From the height of power, the murderer was now a miserable prisoner of war. In 1948, before a Polish court, Forster repeatedly denied his guilt, weakly justifying that he was only carrying out orders from his superiors. But he could not hide the truth from the surviving witnesses, whose tears and sharp fingers of accusation exposed his brutal genocide. Justice was finally served. The court sentenced Albert Forster to the highest sentence, death for his unforgivable crimes against humanity. On February 28, 1952, at Mokotów prison, the trapdoor opened, ending the life of the fanatic who had sown so much pain. Moving on to another tragedy, John Amory was born into luxury and power, the son of British cabinet minister Leo Amory, a family of the highest caliber. However, intelligent but rebellious, John quickly fell into all-night parties, debt, and a miserable failure in his film career. Disgusted with his homeland, he left England to drift to Paris, living a life of debauchery, eccentricity, and indulging in false political fantasies. Seduced by the glamour of fascism, he even embarked on arms smuggling for Franco's side during the bloody Spanish Civil War. His fate changed when he arrived in Berlin, where the Nazis rolled out the red carpet to welcome him as an honored guest, a valuable pawn against Britain. Sitting in front of a microphone, he frantically called on British soldiers to lay down their arms and join the holy war against the Soviet Union, a blatant act of treason. His treasonous voice echoed across the trenches of Europe. But instead of listening, the British soldiers felt only disgust and extreme anger. Not stopping at words, he also fantasized about establishing the so-called British Free Corps, aiming to recruit fellow prisoners of war to turn their guns against the Allies. But he was met with only contempt. The British prisoners of war regarded him as nothing more than a mad clown performing a show, and his plan failed miserably. The great army he envisioned was actually a collection of misfits, sickly and completely useless in military terms. Even the Nazi officials were fed up. They saw John as nothing more than a useful fool and did not hesitate to sideline him when they saw he was no longer of value. In 1945, the game ended when John was captured in Italy. Strangely, he met this end with a smile of relief, as if he had been waiting for it all along. The traitor was immediately extradited to England, where he faced the severe judgment of the law in the fierce wrath of the public. At the historic trial at the Old Bailey, in a tense atmosphere, John Amory did something that left everyone present stunned. He loudly declared, "I plead guilty." With just those 3 words, the treason trial ended quickly in just 8 minutes. The judge slowly placed the black veil over his head, a symbol of death, and sentenced him to death for the unforgivable crime of high treason. Outside the quarter, the powerful old father completely collapsed. The family's illustrious reputation could not save the downfall of his errant son. In the execution chamber, the famous executioner, Albert Pierre Point, coldly prepared the noose. Everything happened with terrifying precision and professionalism. John stepped onto the trap door and met his death with strange calm, ending a life full of crazy illusions in December 1945. John Amory paid for his crimes, but his death left an indelible stain and eternal shame on one of England's most prestigious families. One used violence to suppress, the other used words to deceive. Although their methods were different, both had sold themselves to serve the same evil. The legacy that Forster left behind was only a desolate city of Danzig in ruins and thousands of anonymous graves lying cold underground. As for Amory, he left behind his disgrace and cheap lies, quickly washed away by the stream of history into the sewers of oblivion. Their story leaves a bitter lesson. Absolute power and blind fanaticism will inevitably destroy human nature. And the second lesson is that intelligence or noble birth are meaningless and cannot compensate for a serious lack of morality. Justice may be late, but it will surely be done. The net of heaven is vast, though loosely spread, but hard to escape. No crime can remain hidden forever. The greatest tragedy remaining is the father's pain, when his passionate patriotism could not save him from the cowardly betrayal of his own son. The tragedy of the loyal servant is the moment he realizes his idol has fallen, and he himself is just a tool mercilessly discarded in the dungeon. 2 people, 2 completely different backgrounds, but in the end they met at the same destination, the cold gallows. The tyrants will eventually be forgotten, but the strong vitality and indomitable will of a nation cannot be extinguished by any force. Today, Gdansk has risen brilliantly from the ashes, a testament to the disastrous failure of men like Forster and Amory. History always presents us with crossroads and harsh choices. Each generation must answer the question of conscience. Which side will you stand on? We choose to remember this painful past, because the price of freedom is always paid in blood and with a high vigilance against the seeds of evil. Thank you for following today's story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us in uncovering the mysterious pages of history in the next episodes.